Escape from Tarkov has been in development for more than 5 years, but the global cycle of the game has not yet acquired the shape of being complete, and the project is still a kind of sandbox. Today we will look at the gameplay from two completely different angles and touch on the problems of both experienced players and newcomers who are just getting acquainted with the project. Each wipe begins with another marathon of players in pursuit of the desired 40th level, when the bulk of the quests are completed, and thanks to the high levels of relations with merchants, they will offer the best of goods, in particular, ammunition and body armor. At the same time, the motivation of the players is fueled by the desire to receive a capacious protected kappa case, for which it is required to complete a long chain of quests from different merchants, and the long-awaited opportunity to change the character's clothes, the requirements for which in some cases can even be called outrageous. Nevertheless, it is unlikely that all this can be called full-fledged endgame content, but rather conditional achievements and ways to stand out for those players who spend days in the game. And what do we mean by endgame? First, it is important to understand why the endgame is generally needed, and what functions it is designed to perform. A player who is really a fan of the project and who, without missing an opportunity, is ready to spend all his free time only in Escape from Tarkov, knows the game by heart. Wandering along 100 times trodden paths, shooting bots and hunting for newbies will hardly give him new portions of dopamine, as it was before, during the phase of active study of the game. Undoubtedly, new locations like the reserve and the laboratory help in part here, with a faction of stronger raider bots and a complicated exit system, but this does not affect the rest of the locations, the global economy of the game, and the general gameplay. And if we also consider the pumping of players from the point of view of chronology, that is, taking into account the future plot, from which it is already known that our character starts near the destroyed headquarters of Terra Group in the center of Tarkov and gradually moves towards the port terminal, then several questions arise. First of all, haven't there been any major changes during all this time? At least the Raiders are the same faction based on former PMC operators, that is, it is obvious that they did not appear this very second after the loss of communication with the command, but gradually, and the further, the more they could become. And secondly, the question of beginners becomes relevant. The more time passes after the wipe, and accordingly this can be interpolated for the release, the more obvious the gap becomes between those who have already gone through certain stages, and those who are just starting their way from the city center. Simply put, a meeting between a beginner and an experienced player is impossible from the point of view of the chronology of the narrative, and looks more like a meeting between a modern army fighter and a caveman who is about to learn how to fix a stone on a stick, and this is really a problem. But we propose to take a break from EFT and look at such a game as The Division 2, and try to mentally transfer the concept of its endgame to Escape from Tarkov. In The Division, when the agent reaches a certain stage in the passage of the game, namely, completes all the story missions and gets level 30, the main adventures just begin. As soon as you think that the game is already coming to the end because you have just cleared Washington out of hostile gangs, the city is completely occupied by a new faction, the Black Tusks PMC, which is not only much stronger than previous enemies, but also uses innovative fighting robots against you. And all this is correctly supported by the continuation of the plot. In general, the endgame here breathes a truly new life into the game. But how could we write something like that into our Tarkov? Note that we do not know what the plot of the game will be, and all further ideas may turn out to be incompatible with the idea of the devs, but if you have your own thoughts on this matter, let's discuss them together in the comments. So, let's imagine how it would look like the passage of the Escape from Tarkov in its finished form. At the beginning, all players would start in Tarkov itself, gradually exploring the surroundings and moving further along the locations, to the port terminal, while conducting their own investigation in an attempt to find out what happened, why the hero was abandoned by the command, and how he survived. And suppose that during the investigation of the next riddle, when the player is already sufficiently experienced and smart, a certain global event occurs that completely changes the world of the game. As an example, this can be the activation of the Black Division forces, and what was shown in the Raid series locally will take place throughout Tarkov, starting with a simple strengthening of opponents under the control of artificial intelligence, and the addition of new factions in the face of the Black Division, Peacekeepers, and of the RF Armed Forces, and a large-scale redesign of the game. If you give free rein to your imagination, you can think of a lot. For example, some structures may be destroyed, the introduction of a new side of the conflict will entail dramatic changes in the economy. Serious problems will begin with the supply of goods to merchants. Some of them may even die during all these events, but new ones will appear. Money will be depreciated, food, medicine, and ammunition will gain value. You can even come up with new bosses, plotting all these changes. In general, everything here depends on the developers themselves, and not so much on their imagination and the flexibility of the plot they conceived, but on the technical ability to implement something like that. The key point of the idea is that this whole changed world will be a kind of a new era, where players who are at key stages in the advancement of the Escape from Tarkov story will find themselves, and where new interesting tasks, harsher conditions, frequent shootouts with cruel bots and experienced players like themselves. And in this case, the place of veterans will be not only the laboratory, the entrance to which is limited only by a card, but the whole game. After all, they are looking for where to apply all the accumulated experience, and the late era is precisely called upon to bring fighters of the same weight category together. At the same time, players of the early era will continue to play in the conditions of Tarkov's only unfolding story, with the culmination just ahead. And the influence of aggressive high-level players will become noticeably lower. But in this case, we do not raise the issue of the balance of players in terms of level, skills, or in any other way. On the contrary, we believe that it is great that there are many factors of uncertainty in the game, and often you cannot be sure how many opponents are in the location, what level they are, and what equipment they have. We focus on the issue of the sequence of events, and it seems to us that something like this looks quite logical. The division of the game into early and late stages is primarily intended to help veterans to feel the cruelty of the game again, thanks to the complicating conditions of the economy, artificial intelligence of bots, and, in fact, opponents of other experienced players. The game will largely get rid of cases when, in the later stages of the wipe, newcomers now, and then meet players of the 40th and higher levels, which looks, firstly, strange, and secondly, it really negatively affects the balance, unreasonably raising the entry threshold. But that's a completely different story. And what do you think? Will it be more interesting for beginners to get to know Tarkov with such a system? Will veterans get more battles, and would the game benefit from such an innovation? Express your opinion in the comments.